Vygotsky proposed the concept of the zone of proximal development. Woolfolk, in describing Vygotsky's idea, said the zone of proximal development is the area where the child cannot solve a problem alone but can be successful under adult guidance or in collaboration with a more advanced peer. For Vygotsky, social interaction was more than a method of teaching. It was the origin of higher mental processes, such as problem solving. He assumed that the notion of mental functions properly be applied to groups as well as individual forms of activity. For example, Vygotsky believed groups could remember. Through the use of the internet, such social interaction and collaboration has become possible on a global scale. For the first time in the history of mankind, the global internet and desktop video conferencing has provided enormous teaching and learning capabilities to those who are computer literate. The success of new information technologies will depend on your ability to extend the new media literacy to your students and staff. In conclusion, I want to convey to administrators, educators, and managers in public and private organizations that telecommunications and interactive television are already a resource that establishes a difference between competitive organizations and those that will inevitably stay behind and will disappear from our global markets. It is therefore necessary that we all make investments in developing the professional and technical infrastructures that organizations need to be able to incorporate these technologies in our daily management and business operations. Reducing the cost of travel is one major benefit already demonstrated in many leading organizations around the world which use this technology. But education and training are also activities which cannot be implemented efficiently anymore without it. As electronic connectivity across borders increases, the cost of operating teleconferencing systems will drop even more for multinational and global applications, an activity which is no longer exclusive of large corporations, but also of many small and medium-sized organizations. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Saba. Again, we invite your questions and comments. A teleconference is only as strong as its multiple participants. Please use that return link now and bring your interests to our attention. We begin with a question by fax from Sao Paulo, Brazil, the Fundação Vansolini. It's a question from General Motors of Brazil, in fact, and it asks, how can we increase the number of participants and participation in a video conference in our organization?
Well, first, if you cater to the need of your audience, automatically participation will increase. So I think that the key there is front-end analysis or needs assessment. The second is learning about your audience. In other words, from learning their names, call them by names. Your instructors have to get to know the audience and be able to communicate with them just like they were sitting in the same classroom.
We have a fax from Venezuela, from the Universidad Central de Venezuela. The question is, electronic creativity across borders is the key to video conferencing, and the role of carriers such as AT&T, MCI, Sprint is very important. Are these companies collaborating with businesses and schools in our countries as they do in the United States?
We assume that these major companies know that they need to collaborate with business and industry and education. We have to educate people like AT&T and Sprint and MCI and other companies that are emerging that they need to learn about how educational institutions function or how training functions within a major corporation like General Motors. So there is an education aspect to this on both sides. We have to learn more about telecommunications and what these companies are capable and are not capable of doing. They need to learn from us how we function within education and training organizations.
We have a call from Brazil, from Key TV Comunicação in Rio de Janeiro. Welcome. Your question, please.
We are calling from Brazil, Santa Catarina. The question is, first of all, we want to congratulate the expert speaker and the moderator. Our question has something to do with the facilitator, in other words, the instructor. How can we keep motivation? How can we motivate and keep our students motivated using these technologies of video conferencing and teleconferencing? Motivation.
Okay. Number of different ways. Start with needs assessment. If your video conference caters to the need of the learner, that's a primary motivator. Second, use the capabilities of the medium. Earlier we mentioned humor, we mentioned production values, we mentioned using the capabilities of television or video conferencing as it's supposed to be used. That's a major important function. Third is to keep levels of interactivity high by learning about your learners and engage them in interactivity as much as possible.
Good. We have a question from Panama, from Universidad Tecnológica de Panamá. Welcome. Your question, please.
Sí, muy buenas tardes. La pregunta es la siguiente. ¿Hasta qué nivel superior universitario?
To what university level have you been able to apply these systems and techniques that are new because within the distance education that you have mentioned in this video conference? And what experience does the San Diego State University have on the level of master's degree and Ph.D.s programs?
I think that video conferencing has been successfully implemented by many American universities in several levels, including doctoral level, master's level, certainly undergraduate level. At San Diego State University, I'm personally involved in providing a master's degree program in education administration to 20 sites in Canada. My students in the video production class produce the program, and they are involved in the production tasks of setting up the cameras, operating the cameras, pre-recording videos we call B-roll, doing the graphics, everything. And we broadcast these courses to Canada every month. So that's one experience. And what you're doing right now is another example of video conferencing at San Diego State University.
And we do have several different areas of master's degree study on this campus that involve teleconferencing, educational technologies. There is not a Ph.D. program directly in that field, but only in related areas like multicultural education.
That's true. That's true.
Okay. We have a question now, a call from Sinaloa, from the Colegio de Bachilleros Estado de Sinaloa in Culiacán. Welcome, and your question, please.
Bueno. Sí, señorita. Muy buenos días.
Buenos días.
Colegio de Bachilleres del Estado de Sinaloa, en su unidad de Culiacán, desea formular la siguiente.
We have the following question for you. With all the development of point technology and high-tech applied to education, the educational area, we know that we're convinced that the process of learning and teaching process, it is very important to have action on the part of the learner, because rather than on the instructor's part, because that makes the learner a little more independent. In this regard, with the distance education within this context of how do you edit, how do you promote, and how do you make the student obtain a complete education, a whole education, not just a fragmented education, and based on knowledge, on real knowledge?
Very good.
Well, distance learning is perhaps one component of one's learning and education. Within the purview of distance education, you can make learning as interactive as possible. For example, through new technologies that we mentioned, the web technology or desktop video conferencing, you can make distance learning as personal as possible. But also keep in mind that distance education is just one form of learning. We are not doing away with traditional forms of learning. I think that traditional forms of learning, face-to-face classroom instruction, learning in a group discussion format, face-to-face, has its own place. So it is not distance learning versus face-to-face education. In fact, as we are experimenting with distance learning in my class, we are connecting the two together. We are merging the two formats together. We have decreased the number of face-to-face classroom lectures, but by the same token, we have increased the number of interactive sessions through the web or through desktop video conferencing. When students don't have to commute to campus, they can call upon the instructor and talk to the instructor. The other area that students have responded to is very simple. It's the simple telephone. Very often students come to me and ask me, can I have an appointment with you? And I tell them that, do we have to be at the same place? So why don't you just give me a call? We perhaps don't need to make a face-to-face appointment. The other technology is electronic mail. Electronic mail has increased the probability of faculty responding to their students. So there are a variety of different technologies and different techniques for making distance education as complete of an experience as possible.
We were discussing before the show, about before this video conference, the principle of learner-centered education that Thomas Aquinas in the 13th century was arguing that education is something that takes place properly in the learner. The teacher can do what they can, but whether it's an old classroom or a new technology, it's activating the learner that really makes education and learning take place.
Very much so.
We have another call from Mexico, from the Comisión Federal de Electricidad, Auditorio Atoyac in Mexico, DFA. Welcome. Your question, please.
Buenos días.
Good morning. Since this is the last opportunity that we have this year of linking up with you, we would like to hereby express our best wishes to you for the holidays, Christmas and New Year. Question is, what do you think are the minimal equipment requirements and the training in order to develop some kind of programs using multimedia and interactive multimedia? What are the basic needs?
Well, in terms of equipment, a desktop workstation, microcomputer is a good beginning. And then you can build upon that microcomputer, move into scanners, move into video cameras, audio capability, so forth and so on. But I would start with at least a very good Pentium-based or Macintosh computer, and then depending on your progress, you would keep adding to that. Training is an ongoing process. We never cease to learn more about multimedia because it is an evolving field. It's growing every day. As soon as you learn one authoring system, there is another authoring system down the road. As soon as you learn one computer language, there is another one coming through that simplifies some processes, but at the same time you have to learn a new language. So I'm afraid that that's going to be an ongoing, lifelong process.
We have a question from the Universidad Tecnológica de Tula Tepeji in Tula de Allende, Hidalgo. Welcome. Your question, please.
The question is the following. What are the current costs for an institution and for a company?
That is a difficult question to answer. It depends on what kind of capabilities you already have, and it varies from company to company. There are some corporations that have invested heavily in developing their telecommunication and video production infrastructure. There are folks who have not even started. So depending on where you are and how much prior experience you have with the medium, the cost varies.
Mm-hmm. And even as a system is developed, you add components to it, the costs may vary. I'm wondering what it would cost to do this teleconference we're doing now if you had to separate it out. Budgeting is a complicated process.
It is.
Question now from Panama, from the Universidad Tecnológica de Panama. Welcome, your question.
This is coming from the Technological University of Panama, Regional Center of Azuero. What possibilities do you think we have in order to put together instructional packages through video teleconferencing to train experts in order to modernize, to update education across the board?
It's a very good question. It's interesting that sometimes engineering schools or other disciplines that do not study the field of learning and teaching adopt these technologies earlier than colleges of education or schools of education. The possibilities are there. The technology is there. I think that there you're confronted with attitudes, motivation, incentives, and the organization of schools that may or may not be conducive to these new technologies. So you have a lot of management questions to resolve there. More management issues are part of that mix rather than technologies.
We have a call from UNAM, the Facultad de Medicina Veterinaria y Zootecnia in Mexico. Welcome. Your question, please.
Gracias. Buenas tardes. Habla Patricia Fernández de la UNAM.
Good afternoon. There are problems to overcoming resistance for the use of technology. What can you do to overcome that resistance, not from the point of view of training, but from the point of view of learning and teaching process?
One of the major misconceptions in educational technology has been that technology is there to replace the teacher. It has been a source of resistance. And I think that if we educate our teachers that that is not the role of technology. The role of technology is not to replace the teacher, but bring the learning-teaching process more from the learner's point of view than the teacher's point of view. Then the teacher can actually become active in motivating the learner and in catering to the needs of the learner rather than just presenting information. So there is a role change, and I think that that's a basic source of resistance.
Thank you very much, Dr. Saba. We must now conclude this international teleconference event and series. Thank you so much for your participation. It is increasingly clear that teleconferencing technologies are becoming more available, more diverse, less expensive, and smaller at the same time. This means that what was once an option for only a rich few has become available and of practical value to many more. It is not easy to put on a teleconference. An immense amount of work goes on behind the scenes to set it up and carry it off, as Dr. Saba has explained. We give thanks now to all those many people here at KPBS TV and at each downlink site for all you have done to make this video conference series work. We look forward to seeing you all next year. You will find in your participant manuals the schedule of next year's programs. We thank you at our receive sites for your enthusiasm and support. We are also most grateful to Dr. Saba for bringing his vast expertise to us today. As the moderator for this series of 4 teleconferences, I have found it an honor and a delight to present our experts and to interact with you, our precious colleagues, throughout Latin America. From all of us who collaborate with the International Training Center here in San Diego, I'm Dr. Michael Reel. Thank you.